Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So tell us about Majjhima Nikaya number 10, the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta.
So it's a big one in the sense of how much gravitas it has, how primary it is in our tradition and in people's practices. It's such a key sutta. In it, the Buddha speaks about the Satipaṭṭhāna, the establishings of mindfulness, as it's one etymology kind of defines it as, although foundations of mindfulness is another etymology you'll hear, as the ekayano mago, so the direct path to realization is one translation of that. And basically, the Buddha singles these four foundations or establishings out as the domain of a practitioner in several other suttas. And he divides them into four kind of categories. A bhikkhu or a practitioner abides observing the body in the body, or as the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. And the foundation of the body, the Buddha then goes into these different ways of establishing that foundation, namely the breathing and sort of breathing meditation, postures, movements or sampajanya, sort of situational awareness, the 32 parts of the body, the four elements, and the charnel ground contemplations. So that's the first foundation. The next is Vedana, so feelings, and the mindfulness of feelings foundation. And that's looking at the feeling tone of experience, pleasant, painful, neutral, both in a worldly and a spiritual sense, which is a fascinating distinction we can get into. The third foundation is that a practitioner abides observing the mind in and of itself. So mental states, the mind is constricted, distracted, contracted, and then on through expanded and liberated, and so on. And the final is the fourth foundation of dhammas, which is defined in some places as dhamma categories. So overlaying dhamma frameworks onto our experience. And, you know, the quality of sati, I've heard mindfulness often as connecting our experience to a framework. And whereas in the world we so often connect experience to the framework of self, this is the Buddha giving us these four other really spectacular or really powerful frameworks to look at our experience with. And he then ends with a prophecy that if one practices these sincerely for a year or 7 years, a year, and so on down to 7 days, that one could expect the fruit of non-return or arahantship. So that's quite a thing to aim for. Mm. What would you like to draw out of this, Ajahn, in terms of highlights?
Well, I would like to recommend a book, Satipaṭṭhāna by Bhante Analayo, where he goes into, he's got two books basically on this sutta. The first book, Satipaṭṭhāna, Direct Path to Realization, goes into the ways that different modern and ancient traditions held this discourse. It really is, along with the Anapanasati Sutta, this sutta is probably the most direct elaboration of what to do in meditation. So what Bhante Analayo does is, look at how different modern teachers and these ancient teachers would talk about each of these foundations of mindfulness. And you notice that, say, there are quotes from Ajahn Chah and other Thai forest teachers who really emphasize the first foundation of mindfulness of knowing the body in and of itself, thus teaching different ways of doing breath meditation, focusing on postures and this situational awareness, sampajanya, throughout the day. You've got teachers like Goenkaji teaching the second foundation of mindfulness, knowing feelings in and of themselves as the path, whether that's dukkha, sukha, or neutral. Then you've got teachings like whole schools of Buddhism. Someone could argue, I think well, that Zen or Chan, Chinese Chan, or Dzogchen, Tibetan Dzogchen mind are really based on the third foundation of mindfulness, knowing mind as mind in and of itself. And the way of looking at dhammas is really an overlay which a lot of different teachers use. So I find that quite fascinating. And I have faith that teachers in each of these lineages have probably attained awakening even within our lifetime, or at least in our era. last 100 years or so, and that each of them would teach their own way. And many of them do teach, saying that this is the only way, whereas Bhante Analayo's book really draws it out that, maybe there are these other approaches, and that these teachers just teach from what has worked for them. So
that's great.
Ajahn, I'm curious if you either wanted to draw out anything in particular or just to talk about how you found the sutta useful in your life.
I think one thing to focus in on is the fourth foundation of Dhamma's Dhamma categories. In the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, you'll see a variety of frameworks the Buddha lays out, including the 6 sense bases, the 5 aggregates. I do find it useful, although it's great to have that whole spectrum, to know that comparative studies really point to a core of the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening. So just this dichotomy of positive and negative mental qualities. And for me, that really simplifies that fourth foundation. And the other thing is, I find the specifics of the sutta to be where the real power is. And the foundation of feeling and mindfulness of feelings is really interesting, because the Buddha lays out pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings worldly, samisa. And that's, impact with the world in pleasant and painful ways, or neutral. But he also points to pleasant, painful, and neutral spiritual feelings, niramisa. And those are fascinating, where I believe in the commentaries, it defines pleasant spiritual feeling as, this happiness from loving kindness, from good sila, morality, painful spiritual feeling as desire to attain one's goals and wholesome regret, and neutral as equipoise, equanimity, upekkha. And just understanding that a lot of practice is replacing those worldly feelings with these spiritual ones. And, you can't just give up pleasure, but can you replace worldly pleasure with these spiritual forms of pleasure? And I just love that distinction that you find here. So, And how about you, Ajahn? How have you kind of applied this sutta in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for our teachers and the Thai forest tradition, really to bring things back to the body. It is possible for someone who's gotten, say, a Western type of, a lot of education, a lot of reading, to be very up in our heads. And then for these teachers, many of whom, a generation ago, Ajahn Chah, many of the teachers of the Thai forest tradition had very little formal education, but they were very embodied and could teach from that place. And I think it's really helpful to come back to these practices of knowing the breath, whether it's a long breath or a short breath, knowing it as a long breath or a short breath, being able to breathe into the whole body. We'll go in more into that in Majjhima 118. It might be a year or so, but a couple years. But that's really helpful, knowing the different postures. The aspect of knowing mind as mind, and where the Buddha points out that one knows a mind with lust is a mind with lust, a mind without lust is a mind without lust. One knows a mind with hatred, a mind with delusion, a scattered mind, a constricted mind, an unliberated mind, a mind which hasn't gone beyond, as all of these as they are. This is a hateful mind. This is a deluded mind. And I find that really optimistic, actually, that even noticing, I'm feeling quite deluded right now, or I'm feeling there's anger or aversion of some kind. It's really helpful that I can start right there. Just that acknowledgement, that's an acknowledgement of I'm within this frame of references. Ajahn Jeff's translation of Foundation of Mindfulness, which is shifted out of the frame, which is just totally, being warped and unconsciously deluded by delusion, into a framework of, there is delusion here, but that's not the whole of the story. The mind is bigger than that. So
I think worth pointing or singling out there is with the mental states, the kind of negative mental qualities that the Buddha points to at first. The phrasing is one knows a mind with distraction, as with distraction, and so on. And so this subtle distinction between the mind itself and the negative mental state is experienced. It kind of points to what you're singling out, which is this refuge in the knowing to some extent. So thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah. So, Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week, can you guess? It's sati, and that comes from the root sar, which means to remember. It means mindfulness, although I kind of love the translation recollectedness, recollect, and it speaks to that aspect of mindfulness. So hoping people are able to keep that in mind this coming week.
Let's do it.